Is your take on, are leaders born? You've heard a lot of times people say leaders are born, it's born. But what do you take on it? Do you really feel like leaders are born or are leaders made? So I did some research, and research showed that actually a third of leaders are born and 2/3 are made. And let me go deeper into that. Basically, it was saying that what it is the characteristics. So based off of studies, there's certain characteristics that kind of should be or are connected to becoming a leader. So those characteristics looks like extroversion. So these are people who are extroverts. So they're saying there are certain, there are certain skills that a leader should have, and being an extrovert and having those interaction skills are important. Also, there's a level of assertiveness that they need to have, risk-taking as well as intelligence. So what it is that 1/3 born, they're basically saying they're a third of people who naturally have these characteristics within them. It's within their DNA. However, does this mean that an extrovert can't be a leader? The answer is no. What it is that there's self-development. There's a self-development process that needs to happen, because even for me, I am someone that is an introvert, and I have to learn at times that I'm working with people that have a different behavior styles. So it's just the characteristics that some people are born with that are innately within them. And then there's also the 2/3 that are made. Is something that self-development has to happen in order for them to apply those skills or those characteristics so it's effective in a workforce, in a workspace. So for you, Corey, you're an extrovert. I'm the introvert. So talk about that extrovert part, because again, it's interesting because a lot of people think that only extroverts can be leaders, but introverts can be as well. But I want us to also talk about how those characteristics need to be developed. So how has your extroversion helped you in the leadership space, but also how did you have to develop in that area so you can be effective when reaching and teaching the people you support?
Yeah, absolutely. So, but before we get into that, right, I'll even give you kind of gave some of those tips like the assertiveness, the vision and all that stuff. And I want to give y'all 3 things that I believe that every leader, if you develop, these are things that anyone can develop, right? And so when I'm thinking about what makes a great leader, amongst other things, you think about having a growth mindset, right? So the greatest leaders have growth mindsets, and that's whether introvert, extrovert. A growth mindset just means that I want to see people succeed. I want people to grow, and then you're able to project that onto your team. So as you have this vision and you have these thoughts formulating in your mind, whether you want to speak out about it or not, you have to be able to project that down into your team. But anyone can create a growth mindset, right? And your environment doesn't dictate whether you're born with one or not. Like I was born into an environment where, as amongst a lot of other people that did not have that growth, and this is what the big picture looks like, right? So the second part is being able to leverage diversity. So as a leader, you have to leverage diversity. So as Aisha said, you have different styles, you got different behavioral styles, but how do you actually tap into that and allow that different person to be able to coincide with someone who might not? And I'll just use, to be quite frank, we work with a lot of people with different socioeconomic statuses, right? Or we might have grown up in different socioeconomic statuses. So how do you leverage someone who, like myself, we didn't have a whole bunch of stuff growing up, but you have somebody else that I'm working just right along with that might have had everything that they not necessarily given to them, but they had the exposure and they had the tools to be able to do what they wanted to do. So how do you leverage those two together? One might have a bigger grind than the other one, but one might have a bigger picture than the person with the grind. How do you leverage that together? And then the final part is the clarity and being able to energize your team. And so I'll segue into that by saying, being an extrovert, I was always able to like rah rah, and I'm like, let's go and like let's get it, right? And the team was energized, but early on I had to figure out what were my blind spots, what were my downfalls in that, right? And so there was feedback that I had gotten. I had a leadership role while I was in college, and they said, you know what, everyone loves working for you, and you create this environment that people enjoy coming to work, and people just love being around you. But their feedback was they want more accountability on their behalf. And so, of course, as everybody, you don't want to feel attacked. So I had to check myself, right? I was like 19 years old, and I was like 19, 20. I'm like, what do you mean? I need to hold people accountable. They should hold themselves accountable. But I had to realize that holding people accountable mean different things. It could just mean, hey, what's your goals for the day? It could just mean, hey, I see that you didn't do this, today or whatever, like, right? Or what time are you gonna have this done by? And so I had to learn for myself and develop that. Although I'm the rah-rah and I'm the outspoken and I can have a conversation with anybody and I'm like the true extrovert, there are things that I had to work on. So like, and honestly, an introvert for myself, and I've been around introverted leaders, they're very good at the accountability, and they may struggle sometimes with the rah-rah and the energy and all that stuff around their team, but it's two different sides. So there are people who are going to say, hey, she really holds us accountable, or he really holds us accountable. On the other side, it's like, hey, he's all about the energy and the rah-rah, and he has some things to develop. So yeah, being an extrovert doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win every time. Being a mature extrovert, I should say, is what's going to bring you to the next level when you identify it's not all about just the energy. It's a good part of it and what makes you strong as a leader. But you also have to understand that there are things that you probably downfall, like the accountability or having the tough conversations because you want what's best in a outward spoken way.
I love that. I mean, it's really important that, again, what you're talking about is, like we've been saying, is self-development. It's important for us as leaders to identify that we have to develop ourselves, because yes, we might have all these innate skills and these characteristics that is within our DNA, maybe because of our family members and just the history of our family structures and the characteristics they've had. But we have to realize that these skills still have to be developed, because it also talks about assertiveness. And you need to have a certain level of skill of when to be assertive and when not to be. Risk taking, you have to, especially when you're working for an organization, you have to be very cautious. And then that's where comes that, that really structured aspect of yourself where you're like, okay, should I take this risk? Should I not? Even intelligence, there's a certain type of intelligence, but it might vary depending on the different type of organization you're at. But these are all skills that we need to develop. For me, I am an introvert. I'm an introvert. I said extrovert. So once I get comfortable, then you can see that, hey guys, good morning, how you're doing? But I'm naturally an introvert. And I knew for me that I had to tap into that interaction skill. And I tell you guys a story of when I was at my last organization. Like I shared before, I'm in the military full time. And a lot of the skills that I learned by serving in the military since 2003 really helped develop my leadership skills overall. That also now is conveyed in my business. But I remember one time one of my troops came to me and was like, when we got closer, she was just like, yeah, when you first got here, I thought you were mean, you were nasty, you're rude. And I was like, why? She was like, well, you would come in and you would just say good morning and go into your room. And I would always like close my room, my door halfway, because I had an office, and I would just be there in the lab. And for her, that communicated to her that she didn't know what that meant. And that's the thing, as leaders, we have to really understand, also have that level of self-awareness of how we show up, because we do not know how people interpret that. People that are on our teams might interpret that differently. So we have to make sure that when we're showing up as leaders, that we come off effective, and we're making sure that we're communicating and we build these skills. Because yes, I'm an introvert. Yes, I like quality. Yes, I'm going to provide you a great product, but I need to be able to connect with my people. I need to work on my extroversion. I need to work on my assertiveness or my intelligence in this specific field, because again, how you show up is going to be so important. And really, as a leader, you have to be pretty much like a jack of all trades. You have to be able to have every single one of these characteristics when you step into that space. So that's why I tell a lot of people, hey, I know you want to be a leader because the check looks good, because the status looks good. But do you truly know how to communicate? Do you know how to collaborate? Do you know how to resolve conflict like we talked about last time? Do you have all these skills and characteristics within you that you develop? So again, you can show up and show out effectively.